Hi YouTube. Okay, let's start with the cheeseburger game icon. Here I'm in Photoshop. I start the fresh document. This is 512 by 512, so it's a square icon. And we have enough pixels to have this readability and all the stuff. So I like to create this top group. Cheeseburger. I think it's important if you work with the groups here because you can build up layer by layer and also switch the visibility group by group later on when we draw the cheddar, the bun, the tomato and all the stuff. So inside here I'll create another one. So first I will not start with the layers itself, but I'll do a sketch. And inside here I'll create another layer here, first layer basically. So, and I switch to the brush by pressing the B. Opacity of 65 is totally fine. It will give us what we need, the readability. And I'll start with the bottom part of the bun. The idea of the bun, I think, is it will be mostly like a rectangle, but on the corners a little bit roundish. So let's go like this, maybe even a little bit uneven, something like this. The patty itself, it will extend the limits of the bun. Again, it will be more of a rectangle, maybe a little bit more uneven than the bun itself. Something like this, maybe even more rounder on the corners here. By the way, later on, since we are going to use the pad tool, these things will be easier to adapt. We'll just drag the points and it will adapt. The cheese itself, now for this yellow cheddar cheese kind of thing, I like to think that it's round shape, not round shape, sorry, square shape, but it's rotated like 90 degrees on top of the patty. So the corners have the still characteristic that they are showing that they are sharp, but it's melted on top of the patty itself. So here, corner, corner, there another one, but it's kind of melted over the cheese. This back part will not be shown because other layers will cover it, but still, to give us an idea, I like to draw it. Now the tomato coming on top of it, which sits a little bit more inside the patty itself, I think, and it has this side shape, round shape, something like this. And of course, like this nice cylinder cut shape. Okay, now the lettuce itself. For that, I like to do another layer because the shape of it can confuse us. And it will be something like this, I think. Again, this back parts, they are totally not relevant, but my brain needs it to give this a complete picture. Okay, by the way, we will probably take one lettuce and just copy it, just clone it, and then we will just play around with the warp or with skew and perspective to make it look like it's another lettuce. Maybe here, just looking to the other side, another one, extending over the cheese a little bit more, something like this. Okay, and that will be our lettuce. Yeah, and now the final part of the bun, the top bun, basically. So we can start something like this. And this round shape, maybe a little bit here. Yeah. Okay, I would say that's our sketch to our guidelines, and yeah, I'll call this bun top, and the other one is bun butt and etc, because we have all this cheese and stuff, patty and whatsoever all inside. Okay, now that we are done with the sketch, let's move on to designing our icon actually. So for that, I'll go to this cheeseburger group and I create another one here. This is going to be called bun butt for the bottom part of the bun, basically. So later on we'll also design the top one. I pick the pet tool here and try to go over the sketch. Now intentionally I try to make the left corner and later the right corner a little bit rounder than it is on the sketch, because I think it gives a little bit better style for the bun, basically. You can decrease the opacity to see the sketch lines, to be able to follow them through, and yeah, come up with the opacity again once we are done. So basically I experimented a little bit around with the colors, and for the base layer, this is going to be this value, so you can just put this in to give a little bit of a lightish brown beige color, and this layer we'll call bun butt base. Now we go, so the hierarchy I'm going to do this. So this will be the base, and now we'll create an outline color, and then later on we'll create a shadow and light and a color variation. So in total 5 layers, I'm thinking. So we just duplicate these layers and call this bbot outline there, and double click the icon to open the color palette basically and give in this value, dark, very dark brown. And now what we are going to do is we move this behind this guy, the base color, and basically we'll pick the layer, Ctrl T, and yeah, shape or outline. So if you want more precise control, you can also zoom in. That will allow us to do this kind of thing, so it will scale a little bit better for more fine control, and roughly extend on all 4 sides to give us this outline basically. Okay, now we can switch to the shadows basically. For that we create a new layer, we call this bbot shadow. Now what I want to do is, I don't want to paint all around here. If I do this, you see everywhere I can paint, but I want to create a clipping mask, a layer basically, that is only affected on the base color. So I click this layer, select this layer, and then Ctrl Alt G to create this clipping layer, clipping mask on the base color. So when I go and so this is going to be the shadow. So for that, the color I experimented around with is this value. And also we can go a little bit down with the opacity. And basically if I paint now here, you don't see anything because we are painting on the clipping layer. But here when I paint, you see the difference. So the way I'm going to hand paint this is I'm going to pick a soft round pressure size. By the way, I'm using a drawing tablet, which is really handy for this kind of stuff, especially when it comes to the hand painting. And I'll also go, maybe not direct connection to this left side, but a little bit from here, like this. And also getting a little bit eaten inside to this part. Maybe it's too much, we can blend in now. and also on the right side. So this kinda gives the impression that this middle part is looking, it's in more front, and this right and left sides are curved to the back a bit. So although this shape is 2D, it fools the eye to be as if it's a 3D shape, basically. So that is the thing that I want to do here. And then later on we can create another layer. And this time, I could call it right away. So bbot, this is going to be the highlights. And I'll also create this as a clipping mask. So both highlight and shadows are clipping masks to the base layer. And this time, we can go up with the opacity a little bit. Maybe, yeah, 46 is fine. And the color we are going to pick for this guy is FFD27F. So this time we go to the top part of this layer and slightly paint this light. So something like this. Now don't do this, but put some light here and then some more on this inner part, a little bit more, then here a little bit more, and here, for example, not so much, and then here again. So you got the idea. So it looks a little bit irregular. It's not same all over the place. So basically now we are done with our light and shadows, and what we can do now is introduce some color variation. So I can call this Cold War. And for this, I don't have a color actually. I'll just try to improvise something. So this is, I just sample the color of my base. So color of this base layer basically, and go a little bit more saturated. Let's see how it looks. Okay. So just randomly introduce some color variation. You can always sample back and forth. You can also zoom out a little bit, because this whole thing is going to be an icon basically. So it will probably look like this in your game. So it's important to zoom out and see how it looks like. You can always go back and forth and see. Now, to emphasize this glance, for example, here a little bit more, we can paint here with more saturated color than the base layer itself to give the impression, okay, there is something going on actually, there is some change. So, and then here back and forth. Maybe this shadow is a bit too much. Blend it in, basically. Here we are working with the soft pressure brush. Actually, the drawing tablet is pretty handy at this stage, because like you're painting on a real pen and paper basically. So the more pressure you apply, the more the stronger the effect will get. So that's a good thing. Okay, so I think I'm, at least for the first pass, I'm satisfied with the bottom part of the bun. Now let's move on to patty. So I'll add another group and call this patty. And inside here again, I'm going to start with the new layer and call this patty base. And switch to the pad tool and start going over my sketch again. Here again, decrease the opacity to see where I'm going. Roughly neighboring the patty. And here I think the patty itself should have a little bit of irregularity, so let's push these guys back and forth. the top side and bottom side I won't play that much, but here on the sides mostly. So something like this maybe. Let's turn up the opacity and see how it looks. Okay, this is a little bit too perfect around here. Let's zoom in a bit. This is also a bit sharp. Let's see. This is. Go back to pad tool and here add another one maybe for more control. Yeah, I think that's about it. That's not so bad. Okay, now that we have the base, so basically we can add the outline, which is again the same trick to duplicate this guy and call this petty outline. Move this below and change this guy's color to 3v2a1e. So again, the same thing, we can press the Ctrl T, zoom in for more control, and extend this guy's outline like this, here on the sides, then on top, and also on the left side. Now it's okay, I guess, for the patty to have a little bit thicker outlines because it's the main part of the icon, the meat basically, so that should be fine. And let's move on to adding another layer. Now we'll go basically the same things, the shadow, highlight, and color variation for all this other stuff. So tomato, lettuce, cheese, and top part of the bun, I'll also do the same thing. And here, just for the patty, we can call this patty shadow first. And again, put it as a clipping mask to the base layer. Go to the color and pick the shadow layers color to this value and switch to the brush. Again, we can mimic the same shape that we did for the bottom part of the bun to keep it consistent. So again, my opacity is on 35% and I'm on the soft brush. So light and shadow game. Here on the right side, again, this like curved light and shadow, maybe a bit stronger on the top right side. That should be fine. And again, I don't like the shadow to be continuous over here, but I'll leave like a little bit of gap in between and start here again. And here make a bit of stronger shadow. And here again, a little bit more stronger. I mean, the idea is to put the shadow on the bottom edge, but not just as a continuous straight line, leaving the gaps a little bit in between. And since, as I said, I'm using the drawing tablet, I can use the pressure, because here I'm on the soft pressure, soft round pressure size brush. So I can fine-tune and control the pressure I'm applying to strengthen or weaken the effect, basically. And so I think that's okay-ish for the first pass at least. I can sample the color and blend in this to the shadow layer. Here I'm on the shadow layer, basically as a clipping mask to the base. And wherever I see a strong transition, I can just blend it in basically. So the next thing is again the highlight. So let's go to the highlights and pick our highlight color, which is going to be this value. And again, start from the top edge. Here we can put a little bit more highlight, and then throughout the top side of the patty itself, this thin highlight basically. Again, keeping the opacity and 35% and soft round brush is totally fine. I think throughout all this icon, throughout all the layers, I'm going to work with the soft round pressure size brush. I don't need the hard one. And here on the sides, also a little bit more light. Actually, we can at some spots go even more brighter. Maybe at the top. And here as well. Just very slight touch. Here as well too. Okay, now to blend it in a bit more, we can sample the base color and just paint this guy's in, paint this guy's back, basically, wherever it feels too strong with the transition. And that should be okay, I think. Maybe a little bit more here to separate the light and shadows. That's cool. Okay, so now that we are done with this, to save it from this monotone look on the base color, we can add some color variation. Again, I'll add a new layer, and I call this patty color var. And again, it's going to be clip mask because I want to only paint on the base layer. So I'm going to sample this, pick just some other slightly variated color around the sample color and start painting. The idea is maybe because this patty doesn't get cooked overall at the same degree, so basically we can maybe put some slightly burnt places, so darker color, something like this. And then again here, things like this. I mean, the color is there. We can always blend in if it's too much, if it feels too much, or if you don't like a pattern. I'm just going to make a first pass of paint, then I'm going to zoom out and see how it looks. So to give this layered cook, like here shadow, here normal, here a bit burnt, then back to normal, and the light is shining on top. So maybe this middle line is too regular. To break the regularity, this marked continuity or whatever that word is, I mean, you got it. So okay, let's maybe add some more color variation. Also, we can play around with the brush size. So what we did is we had the base color, then we decided to add some slightly burnt spaces, and now we are going to add some more juicy parts, maybe some parts where the meat is a bit more fresh or a bit more juicy. So just to paint the stuff inside. Here we can also always sample the other colors because we have them. It's all there. It's like a palette actually. So we can sample and yeah, paint some irregularities. Okay, I think as the first pass, that's also fine. If necessary, when the icon is there and we zoom out and look, we can always polish, but I think the patty layer is fine for the moment. Okay, for this part, the left part still, we can try to blend this in a bit more. Basically for this part, we can move on to the right side. Here we can basically go a little bit more darker than this at the top. And here basically I can have some slight color variation as well, so we can just improvise on here and there, and always we can zoom out and see how it looks. Not sure if yeah, I think that should be fine. The overall look, anyway, we are going to see how it looks. For the cheese layer, I'm going to hide the patty first, and also from the sketch the bun and the on top and the lettuce layers, so that we get a clear view of the cheese. And I'll again put a group, call this one cheese, move it inside our main group, and then add a new layer and start designing the cheese layer basically. So this is the cheese base. Again, switching to the pad tool, going over the sketch lines, nothing too fancy, nothing too crazy, just reduce the opacity to see the lines and go over these lines basically. It's very easy to do that with the pad tool. Just maybe you can do a couple of practice to feel comfortable, but generally it's very handy tool. And I find personally to sketch with freehand and then go over the lines with this pad tool, this is a very powerful combination. So we are done with the shape, so let's come back up with the opacity and then basically double click this and assign the base color, which is the FFD84D. There you go. What I'm going to do here is to duplicate this guy, and instead of outline this time, I'll give a bit more 3D shape thingy. So I'll just duplicate this layer. We can keep it, or maybe cheese base front, let's say, because I'm going to design this front part, or the front part basically. So what I'm going to do is I will just Control T this again, Control T, and move this guy downwards. I'm moving the cheese base, but it doesn't matter because actually let's do it correctly. So Control Z and Control T again, this time on the cheese front, and now I can just basically assign this a bit more darker color so we see the difference. Generally, maybe this. Okay, that's the current color. If you do this, yeah, let's maybe try with this. Okay, try with this base for the front part. Okay, now what I'm going to do is move this guy below, so we have this color variation, but if you see on the corners, the illusion is still not there, so I'm going to pick the front, pick the yeah, what do you call this? The last points, the farthermost points, and then move them back into place. Just this once are enough. And if you see now, we have nice color difference. Now, since this side and this side are also different from each other, we could basically also make them to other color. We'll do in a second. So let's take care of our bases. So this top parts, shadow and highlights first. So what I'm going to do is choose shadow, yeah, and then make this a clip layer again, and let me see what color I picked for that. The shadow is E09, E2A. So on the brush, as I said, soft round brush, nothing's changed there, so we go on the edges, a little bit of shadow, that's on the right side. So okay, that's a bit too much maybe. So here we blend in with the base color. Okay, now let's do another layer, and this time cheese highlights. Cheese highlight, and the color we picked there is, let me check, FFF3A3. And this is the highlight basically, so we go and paint this like this mostly. Okay. Top part, and also maybe here a little bit light is penetrating this parts, the edges, basically giving us some not very perfect shapes on the surface. We can almost blend them with the base, which we should do, because otherwise it would look awkward. Also, we are going to also introduce a color variation, so another layer, and this time cheese, color var, and again we can sample the base color, go to another color and paint this. Also just to introduce more character to the cheese. Just here playing here and there around. Whenever now I want to make maybe like 1 fold, 2 fold, here 3 folds. I don't know if it's a good idea. Maybe we can blend this a little bit more. Now this color variation layer, I call it color variation, but it's like a mix of highlight, shadow and color variation. So because it's sitting on top, I'm just generally polishing the layer and making like a makeup layer basically. That's the final thing, the final exit before we sell this thing out. So this is the correction layer, color variation layer, so to say. Okay, let's see what else we can do. Maybe here also. By the way, we can paint this all day, but these parts are not going to be visible anyway, so it's up to you. Maybe you want to save some effort there. Okay, so yeah, doesn't look too bad. Now for the front part, the first thing I want to do is maybe add another layer, of course. Let's call this cheese base front left, and this guy can be front right. So, or maybe let's call this front only. Oops. Come on. Yeah, no. Okay. Make this clipped and then duplicate this layer, and this one we call front right. It doesn't really matter, but if you open the project later on so that you're not confused, at least I get confused easily when I don't name these layers very properly. So as the name says, let's start with the front now. If you look at generally, here we put a bit more light and here a little bit less light, so why not making this guy a little bit more brighter on the left side and a little bit more darker on the right side. This will also give us the 3D look, basically, so the eye will catch, okay, there is something happening because the color changed. So let's start with the upper shadow layer a bit. So I'm going to sample this guy, make it a little bit darker, and start painting here. Here we live out. Basically something like this. Yeah. And then we can sample this guy, make it a little bit more bright, see if that works. Yeah. It kind of works. Okay, here's the shadow coming. Maybe we can put some more light here. Just cut the shadow to break the shape a bit. Always scroll out and see how it looks. Now, before we move on to the tomato, we can just see how it all looks together with the patty. Because as you see here, we have some nice highlights, and here also on the top edge as well. Just completing the shape, and yeah, will be a bit of patty if all this would have vanished. So we can do one thing actually and see how it looks. We can open up the group and select all the layers, and then Ctrl T and right click, and here we can select warp and see if we can get this into shape. Maybe, not sure if I can do that. I can decrease the opacity of this guy a bit. Yeah, should be able to, why not? So maybe to 70% here so that I can see the highlights, and then select all the layers. Ctrl T and then right click to warp. And see how that goes. Maybe we can do something like this so that not all the highlight is gone. I mean, some portion of the highlight will be definitely gone, but let's see how far we can get without, yeah, destroying the cheese in total. And this part we could try to down, sort of to give a feeling that the cheese is sitting on top, and with the heat of the meat it's just got melted, mostly also from the edge, from the right side here, from the middle, and here from the left side. You need to see in the overall look. Maybe it will look good. Let's see. Okay, let's see how that looks now. Turn back the opacity. Doesn't look too bad. Actually, maybe this part, but okay, there we can also go to a color. That was the cheese base font left. Let's sample this guy and see if we can paint some more depth into it, like this. Now, because this is like a cavity, like it's more inside, the light cannot get there that much as it does in normal surfaces. So it's understandable that this is more darker, and also that's what we are painting. So basically, let's see. And also one more thing, maybe I can highlight this transition a little bit more, just to give here a bit more profile, just to tell the eye, okay, there is something going on. This part cannot get the light that much. And here as well, maybe here too. Like here we also have some little crevice. And here on top it could be really shiny. So I could paint it like this, maybe more on the tip. Yeah. And just to complete, this is not the front, this is the... okay, we can go to color variation. It's all the surface. So basically here we need to tell that something is going on. Maybe not so bright as this guy, but definitely something like this. Yeah. And blend this guys in. Again, go here. All this. Yeah. Okay. Color variation, layer. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, the more times you spend with it, the better it looks. I'm maybe not so much satisfied with the tip, but yeah. Let's see. Okay. Now for the tomato. Again, I'll create a new group. We'll call this tomato. And inside tomato base layer, switch to the pad tool and go over the sketch for the tomato shape. Again, we can decrease the opacity to be able to follow the lines. Put them into place. And then we can add actually another tomato layer, tomato front maybe. And that tomato front is going to actually, maybe let's not do it like this, but duplicate this layer, because then we'll have the same shape and we can play around. Tomato front. And this tomato front should be a bit more reddish actually, so let's keep a saturated version of this. And then we can just drag this guy to put it into position. If it's roughly at the position, so we can just select this and start placing this guys more like this into position. Now here I'm following this back main line, back top line of the sketch. So I'm putting this points basically in the position. That's the beauty of working with the pads. It makes it really handy and gives another level of control in comparison to when you are freely just hand drawing stuff, because the curves and the dots are getting arranged automatically and it's basically non-destructive. So you can play around with this guys very easily. Okay, let's see how that looks. Let's go with the opacity, and here same thing. Okay, that can be definitely better. The problem is this front. Let's see how, if I do this, yeah, let's check. Okay, that's not so bad. And the problem child here is this guy, probably, yeah. Okay. And maybe this guy. Meeting it up. Okay, here that is fine. Maybe we can, if I move this. No, not about that. Sorry, the front. We could move this to this side. Yeah. So it feels a bit more continuous. So now this is the front part. So let's go to the front and add another layer. And this will, this I will call the tomato front shadow. Make the clip layer and pick the color for this guy to be this value. So it's a bit shadow, and here I'll follow the same pattern that we did so far. Basically on the left side, on the right side, and on the bottom, at the bottom. So something like this will do. And also here we can just do this to break the continuous line a little bit. And paint it over, just roughly. Now, because this shape should be round, what we can do is we can switch to the highlight. Anyway, the top is going to get a highlight, so let that tomato front highlights. Where we're gonna put, and here we can pick a color. Let me see what I got. 787A. That is our highlight color basically, and we can start on the top of the edge slightly, and then just do this in the middle, so it gives a feeling that it's round to the sides. Yeah, I think it's a little bit too much here. shines. So here in the middle of the tomato, it shines a bit more in comparison to the other parts. So we can do this basically. Also, let me see what happens if it puts also a little amount of shine to the other places. So does that look bad or good? Maybe a little bit more subtle version. So I sample the other from the other parts from base color and just paint it over. I mean, the character of the shine is still there. Let's also do this to this side, maybe to the left. Yeah, that doesn't look so bad. Actually, that's good. Okay. And also here, to emphasize the turn, we can draw a little bit more shadow so that from this side it goes to the left, here it shines again, and here it goes really dark, basically. Okay, same story here. And what we can do now is some color variation also. Let's see how that looks. Tomato front color variation. What we're going to do is pick the base layer, pick the base, and do some color variation. Try to do some color variation, see how that looks. I mean, this is going to be a game icon, so probably, maybe it will not be noticeable if, I mean, okay, if it's like more bigger customer menu item where the player doesn't, I mean, if it's not in the playtime, but the player has time to shop something in the marketplace or something, maybe then it might matter. But on a running game, I think maybe these parts will not so much noticeable. Okay, so that is the tomato front, that is the tomato base. I'm thinking maybe we can skip this part because lettuce is going to be sits to this green salads and all that stuff is going to sit on top of this, so might not worth the effort. But let's see, let's skip it for the moment and switch to the lettuce, and later on if we need we can paint some more. So by the way, here it's how it looks. Maybe I'm not so satisfied with the evenness at this. So this bottom edge of the tomato is probably too that is too, how do you say, too linear. So we can try to make it a little bit uneven, let's say. So Control and select, and then Control and try to move this part a bit more to this, like this. Just create some unevenness, I would say. Okay, because there is no perfect cut in real life. Let's see. Still. Ah, crap. I was on the other layer. Sorry. Okay, let's see how that looks. Yeah, maybe a bit better. Too uneven. Okay, I think that is not so bad. What else we can do? So that's our tomato. I'm just thinking, do we need an outline for this guy? Let's see. Let's put an outline and see how that looks. Tomato outline. Because I deliberately left the outline for the cheese, not having outline everywhere. Because as you see, in the case of patty, it's covered anyway. Maybe it's a good idea to make outline, no outline, outline, no outline. So, but we did outline, so we skipped for cheese. Let's try it with the tomato, how that looks. Actually, what I'm going to do is I will just duplicate the front layer. Let's say tomato front outline, and change the color of the sky to this. So that is tomato font. Let's put it here. And basically what I will do is I'll just Ctrl T and extend this outline to the left and right. The top part I will not do because that will come from the base or the front, so to speak. Again, duplicate layer, tomato top outline. This will call. And the color will pick something like this maybe. Move it below the original base, and only thing that we need to do is this. And see how that goes. Okay. That's okay. Maybe a little bit less. Yeah. And now for this part, this is front color variation, right? Okay. So what we can do is we could switch this guy to art pressure size because we want a clear cut, and we could go a little bit smaller and let's see. So this is the base, this is the front. Okay, so then let's create another layer, tomato front outline paint. I'll save that name because we'll use it for the front, for the top or for the base. So what I will do is this. Okay, I see. The highlight, but the highlight should be also Yeah, the highlight should be definitely as the shadow as the color bar. So an outline I think should be at the top of everything, but okay, where do I get this other guy? So let's turn off the sketch. Okay, that's the sketch, that's no problem, all good then. So the outline, could just paint like this. Yeah. It's okay, I think. Now let's put the guys back in place. Outline. Paint. And do the same thing for the front. Sorry, for the... That's the front outline. Tomato base. Okay, we never painted the tomato base, so what we are going to do is another layer. This is the top outline, basically. Actually, this is just to separate the top layer from this black line. It's not mandatory, but let's do it. This is also helping us to see, okay, there is some difference between the tomato's outer shell and also the inner part, because this is like a cut, basically. And yeah, okay. So we can close the tomato also for now. Okay, now for the lettuce part, I'm going to create another group, call this lettuce, and move it inside and start by creating the first layer. So again, I'll call this maybe top base. That's top base. And select the pad tool and start drawing. So maybe this can be a bit more round, maybe. Something like this. Okay, now let's duplicate this layer. This will be front base, and slightly move this down. And now pick a bit of a darker color. That's a bit more readable. And now put this guys into place, basically. So, okay, let's see how that looks. Yeah, we got a nice 3D shape. Okay, now this is useful because this is the front base layer, so when I want to hand paint some shadows in the crevices and some light parts, I can do directly on this as a submask on this layer. Actually, let's do that. So create another layer. Let's call this lettuce front. Let me copy this. Shadow. Okay, now this is going to be a clipping mask to this. So I can pick this color, go a little bit darker, and start painting some crevices. Here I can also zoom in with a little bit more control. I can go in more darker and pick smaller brush size and paint more darker. Now I don't need to worry about striking here, because as I said, this is pretty handy. It's like a clipping mask, and which makes sure that we are only painting at these areas. Also maybe something here and there. Yeah. Maybe here also a little bit darker. Just to emphasize, okay, there is some surface, and here a bit more lighter and also a bit saturated. Same story here. Need to see how that looks. Yeah. Again, here on the transitions, basically. Okay, that seems nice. It's a fairly simple enough shape. Now we can go lettuce front, shadow. This is not just shadow, but shadow high or something like this. Yeah. So actually it's light. Let's say light. Then we have everything. So then we are going to do the same thing for this guy, but for the top. And again, a clipping mask. And start where we have the lights and shadows for the front part. We can also continue. Basically, just to see if I'm doing something. Okay, generally light can hit from this side also, mainly. You can say on the edges. This part we can do a little bit more subtle light, let's say, and also blending in. Okay. As a continuation, just to blend in a bit better on this side. Just to emphasize, okay, there is also cut on the top side of the lettuce, not just so the surface is not perfectly fine, but it also has some. This cut here also continues on the top side, basically, just to emphasize that a bit. Same story here. Now we don't pick the exact dark tone, but a little bit lighter, because it is the same cut of the nature, but it gets light from the top surface, so that's why we make it a little bit mild. And also on this side, maybe just to emphasize, okay, we don't see the other side completely, but there is a cut, definitely. So same story here, and here also a bit. Yeah. Okay. Okay, now what we can do is basically we can pick another layer and call this mainly stem. And for this guy, I have no idea what I'm going to pick for color. Let's see. So here we can, or we need to do some trial and error. Maybe also we can, yeah, opacity is already 35%. And this is also going to be a clipping mask on the top because I only want to paint on the top. Let's see how that looks. So the main spine first, also not a straight line but a little bit tilted, and maybe it lands on the shiny part. That should be fine. Okay, something like this. Also to the sides. Now as we move along to the root of the stem, these branches should maybe get a bit bigger, just to give an impression of, oh, maybe we can do even double branch here. Like this is the mother, the impression is like this is the mother of all stems and these are the children. As we get to the tip of the stem, they get smaller, let's say. Okay, that's cool. And one more thing now to give a bit more effect of a 3D, like we can say stem shadow, and also make this a clipping mask. And what we are going to do is sample the base color, make it a little bit darker, and here on this crevices of the stem, how did I sample? We just paint in some shadows basically. This will also serve as a color variation to the stem, to the main top surface of the lettuce, which is nice. Okay. I think I'm satisfied with that. So that will be your base lettuce, or maybe we painted we made it a little bit, how do you say? It's shrinked basically, but yeah, that should be okay. We're gonna see. So that will be lettuce. I'll call this maybe lettuce 1. And let's see how that goes on multiplying this. Okay, now I'll just click on this lettuce 1 and I'll say duplicate group. And we can call this lettuce 2. And basically we can rotate this. Actually, the first lettuce we can make a bit bigger first. Bigger, bigger, bigger. And then we can just click here and click on the perspective so that this guy sits a bit more at the top of the tomato. And then we can rotate. And then of course we can open everything up, select all the layers, Ctrl T again, right click, and we can try to warp and see how that looks. One thing I noticed, my hand paint does not follow along. So I hit escape. If I warp this, I cannot warp this. Okay, that's strange. The hand paint doesn't follow along. Okay, anyway, since we are done, basically, what we can do is we can merge layers, and then I'm sure it's going to follow along, yeah. Okay, so what we are going to do now is we are going to warp these guys into place. Something like this. And also I'm going to duplicate this. Let's call this lattice 3. Hide this one. Again. Lattice 3. Select everything. Merge layers. Again, warp. Now the back part doesn't matter that much because we are going to put a bun there anyway. Let's go to perspective first, and actually let's make this a bit bigger first. Let's go to perspective, make this guy this. Now we can rotate, and we can also flip horizontal so that it looks to the other side basically, and we can make it bigger now, and now we can warp that this guy is covering the right side basically. Okay, so maybe what I'll do is I'll just duplicate this guys, duplicate group, and let's call this lattice 4. Just play around with the shape. We can also try to skew this a little bit. Just make sure that it sits in place better. And then we can always warp. Okay, that's the that is going to be lattice 5, I think. Okay, here we skew. Skew. Like this. And open it up, select it, right click to warp. Just to put these guys into place. Actually, I think I'm going to copy the 4 and call this 6. We can delete the lattice 2 now, or let's call this lattice base, because there or unmerged layers are inside. The 6 is, we can still flip horizontal, I think. like this. Also turn it a bit round and also move it on top. Yeah. Move it into place. I don't want to lose the tip of the cheese. But if I don't put it there, it will look too empty. Maybe I can make it smaller and rotate it in. Okay. Now this summarizes the lettuce part. Let's create another lettuce group and put everything inside. Okay, now the final part, the bun top. There I'm going to use the same color scheme I did for the bun bottom, basically. So again, we can turn on the sketch and see on the bun top. Okay, I would say let's still keep the shape of bun top, and then we can always move it around, basically. So bun top base. This will not have top or front anyway. This is just going to have one shape, so we can start following the bun sketch along, top bun sketch along. Need to be careful that the curve is really has volume. So I'll probably go down with the opacity again, just to see what I'm doing. Okay, so we have a main shape. And again, I'm going to use the same color scheme I did for the bottom part of the bun. And I must say the bun part is the most part, yeah, I enjoy it a lot in comparison to other layers. I don't know why. Okay, let's duplicate this layer and make this an outline. So the bottom part outline, and this is going to have the color 3B2A, 1A. Move it down and Control T. Just the same old trick. Top, left, right, and bottom. Just make an outline out of it. Okay, now we can do a new layer, and let's call this bun top shadow. And the color value for this guy is going to be C96A3D. I can switch to the brush mode and make this a clipping layer, and then start painting basically. Okay, I think I'll switch to soft round brush for this again. Okay, clipping. Too much undo. Okay. gives the impression. Okay, that's round. Inside. And for the highlight, let's call this spun top highlight. Make this a clipping as usual. And the color we are going to pick for that is FFD27F. Let's start again at the top. So it shines a bit and transition to shadow. Also what we can do is we can put here a little bit of highlight. Here. Yeah, that doesn't look too bad. And the same old layer as color variation, so bun, top, color, war. Again, we sample the base layer for this and go a little bit more saturated maybe. Just have something else than the monochrome color. And also we can play around with this, make the brush size smaller and also paint some different portions inside. I mean, as you can see, as long as we have the frame, so here left, bottom a little bit and right shadow to give the feeling of a round, and then top and this glancing spot of highlight. So these are our anchors, so to say, to make this shape look nicer. And after that, you can add a color variation layer. Oh, you see here, I forgot to make it clipping, but you can add this color variation layer and sample the base color and then move it around. I mean, don't go there or there, but if the base color is this, you can just move around this spot, maybe, and then just paint along with the soft brush just to see how it looks. And then once you have this, you basically have your color palette and you can just sample from here. You don't need to go over there anymore, you can just sample here and then you can paint some interesting nice shapes. Okay, now if I turn everything back on, it looks like this. And I think the lattice is maybe a little bit too sharp on the edges, but other than that, yeah, I also can put some sesams at the top, which I'm about to do just. That doesn't look so bad, and then also we can wrap it up with doing some background, basically. Okay, before we switch to the background, let's create another group and call the Sesam. And inside this, we can create some tiny sesam shapes. I'm not going to have a shadow light to this, guys. It will be just normal sesams. Layers. Okay, that should be fine. And what we can do here is just have some 3D illusion with the drop shadow. Let's see the size. Maybe could be like this. Yeah, I want to print the 3D version to be there, but also the smoothness should be correct. With the distance we need to see. Okay, maybe 3 should be fine. Let's see how that looks when we duplicate this, guys. Okay. So Control C, Control T, and then I can basically shape this guy's to appropriate positions randomly. Okay, that's also done. Okay, now to the background. Let's create a layer from background. And what we can do is we can turn on this bevel and emboss to have this pressable icon effect. And also we can turn on the gradient overlay. So here, this is what I previously created on the gradient color scheme. I think this fits the icon very much because it doesn't contain this colors directly, and the others can be emphasized by that. So what we have is a darkish blue on the top, on the bottom left corner, and a very light blue, almost cyan, on the top right corner. And we can play around with the angle here depending to your liking. So the transition from dark to the bright should start happening from the bottom left corner. And also we can play around with the scale to adjust how sharp this transition is going to be. Like if I put the scale to leftmost, it's very noticeable strict changing of transition, and it's not so harsh if I go up with the scale. So that's a nice cheeseburger icon. I think the lettuce part we could do a bit more. Unfortunately, I merged it now, but before merging, if you like, you can make this part a little bit more thinner. So the front layer you could put it a little bit up there, so it ceases to exist here, maybe, so that this big part, this big chunk, doesn't disturb the eye. But all in all, that's the flow, how you can do a cheeseburger icon. Yeah, thanks for listening, and see you next time.